Welcome, everybody. We are done with the first three sessions: the internal landscape, the spectator versus the actor, and the mental equilibrium. Looks like now we have built a solid foundation. And now we understand how that internal conflict, how mastering that internal conflict is important to maintain a steady core amidst chaos. So now we come to the next step where when we have to act, how do we act? Yes, one was to maintain a steady core, but after maintaining the steady core, are we still ready to make that choice? Exactly. That is what the topic of uh, today's session is going to be: anatomy of choice. So, today we are talking about anatomy of choice. Now, what is it? As professionals, we have to take many new decisions each day. But in reality, are they truly new decisions? It has been proved that very often our mind operates from a default setup that is written because of our biological and our psychological uh, conditioning of the mind, right from our childhood to various events that happen in our personal and our professional life. So, the goal of today's session is we are going to make you understand that to master our mind, it's not just about learning new skills, but it's about the ability to understand the blueprint of our own mind and then redesign that blueprint so that our actions are not default reactions from our past. Fresh decision is often a myth. It is is it really a decision or is it a reflex? When a crisis hits, do we really rise to the level of our intelligence or do we react from our past conditioning? Let's look at an example. Let's imagine in a big firm, in an IT company, there's a tech lead who has spent 6 months in going through various workshops of agile innovation and a lot of things. This tech lead has been taught that to grow, the team must take risks, must view mistakes as data. He intellectually has agreed with each and every word. And suddenly, what happens? During the high stakes client demo, a junior developer accidentally pushes a bug that crashes the live server. Now the client is silent. The atmosphere has suddenly become tense. The tech lead has to take a decision at that moment. As per the training, the tech lead should ideally say something like this: okay, this is a great learning moment. Let's isolate the bug, apologize to the client with a timeline, and forget, let's not blame each other in the postmortem. But what does the condition reflects? The reflex of the past of zero error. How does the lead react? The lead's heart rate suddenly, there's a spike in the heart rate because of his past conditioning that has been built over the past 20 years because of that zero error environment. Suddenly, without thinking, he snaps at the junior. Who authorized this push? Why wasn't this checked? I told you to be careful. Now, the lead didn't decide to be angry. He didn't decide to abandon whatever he learned in that innovation. But suddenly he felt to the level of his conditioning, the blaming reflex. So, what did we just understand? That the lead, though the lead was conditioned to be an innovative, fail fast leader, but because of the training that he went through, but because of the past conditioning, the reflex was that the technical lead thought, oh, I must find a scapegoat to protect my department's reputation, to protect my reputation. In that 1.5 second, whatever training he had gone through, suddenly it crashed and the reflex won. So, what I'm trying to say is, are we choosing the way we react, or are we just replaying our past conditioning? In India, we often talk about log kya kahenge. We are so worried about how the society thinks. We are so worried about, let's say, as a senior, we are worried about, okay, as a senior, I shouldn't be wrong. So it's okay for even if there's a mistake, it's okay for my team member to suffer, but I should not be wrong. Now, this is what, this is the way the mind is framed. So the trap is that though we have gone through a lot of training, though we talk about reacting in a new way, but we are still conditioned as 30 years ago. The 1996 conditioning still works when you are trying to solve a 2026 problem. So if your mind is an architect, then instead of using that old blueprint, it's high time that you choose to redesign your mind, to rework, and then look at it or learn to react in a fresh way. So what we do next is what we are going to hear from Meenakshi.
Thank you, Dr. Sandhya, for understanding this autonomy of choice by the scriptural wisdom. So, in order to understand the inner vritti and mechanism of choice, I take you to 5,000 years ago, understanding the Bhagavad Gita. So, I've taken two shlokas, 3.27 from chapter 3, which deals with illusionship of doership. It reads, Prakrite kriyamani gune karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudatma karta hamiti manyate, which means all actions are performed by the qualities of nature, also known as gunas. But the ego deluded person thinks, I am the doer. Krishna here is revealing something very subtle and powerful. What you call my decision is nothing but conditioning which is acting through you. So, as we see in the shloka, Prakriti. So, what Prakriti means, what all it includes? It includes your habits, your upbringing, your past experiences, your tendencies, which is vritti, your emotional patterns. All of this together drives action. So, now when I say vritti and then I say a person deluded by egos thinks I am the doer. So after the action happens, then the ego stands up and says, I did this. This was my choice. I am responsible for everything. So unnecessarily, the person takes himself accountable and responsible for the acts which he has not even done. Let's take an example, a very simple example. You reacted angrily in one situation. What actually happened? A trigger came, past conditioning activated, emotions arose, reactions happened, and you reacted angrily. But once this situation is over, and when you retrospect, you say, I chose to react. Where were you responsible? Were you responsible? Your vrittis act, your ego claims ownership. So there is a very thin line between your ego and your vritti. So, what actually happened? The trigger came, past conditioning activated, emotions arose, and reactions happened. Your ego says, I chose to react. But what is the core insight here? Your ego is claiming the ownership, but your vrittis act. So, why are we understanding this? Why are we going so much inside our mind? Why? Because when we have a clear understanding between our vritti and our ego, our nature and our ego, we find that this is going to reduce our guilt. Why did I do this? We will not say. It will also reduce pride because we will not claim that I did everything perfectly. And this is going to increase awareness. What is driving me? Why is this is happening me? We are going to have a broader spectrum to this. So if we relate it to the spectator connection, we find that if we are not the doer, we are just the observer. Before saying I did this, whenever it comes, I mean, throughout the day, even tomorrow, even a month later, a year later, whenever you say this, you claim I did this. Pause and see what within you made this happen. What, how you choose it, why it happened to you. Yesterday, I was watching a rule by Ajit Doval sir. He also said, while making a choice, just wait and watch. Have that sakshi bhav within. Have that observer effect within. Then you will not make any choice in delusion. You will not make any choice out of your ego or out of your nature. You will see things crystal clear. Over to next slide. So now I make you travel to shlok number 3.34, which deals with likes and dislikes. These are nothing but the hidden drivers. We have the tendency of saying, I like this, I don't like this. We have always having this mindset, I want tea over coffee or coffee over tea. So Lord Krishna also said the same thing in Shloka 3.34, which reads, Indriya sendriyastharthe raga dvesho vyavasthito tayo nar vash magacche tato hasya paripanthino. which means for every sense object, there is attraction, which is known as rag, which has been recited above, and aversion, which is dvesh. One should not come under their control as they are obstacles. So this shlok reveals the engine behind vritti. First shloka 3.27, we refer to vritti, tendency, nature, how, why things are happening. Here we are discussing the engine behind our vritti, why any tendency develops in our mind. Every moment, our mind is filtering between rag and dvesha. I like this, I don't like this. What happens next? Your choice automatically follows. If you like something, you move towards it. If you dislike something, you move away from that. Most decisions are not conscious. And here, Lord Krishna is taking us towards consciousness, awareness. And when we take decisions, what happens is we do we react emotionally. So they most of them are the outcome of emotional reactions, comfort seeking patterns, avoidance patterns. Say in real life, if I take one example, if you avoid a difficult conversation, if at all, a conversation with your father, with your wife, with your boss, you avoid a difficult conversation, chodo jane do, we avoid it. Why do we avoid it? Is it logically avoided by our mind? It's not. Many a times it's avoided because of discomfort. That discomfort is dvesha. We have the tendency of scrolling our phone repeatedly, scrolling what's going on in Insta, what's going on in FB, who has seen our status, who has liked it, who has not even responded it, ignored it, whether our message has become a blue tick or not yet. Even after becoming double blue ticks, the person has not responded. I mean, we are of the mind, we are eager to know why things are happening like that. So, why do we do that? Because of raga. We get a pleasure in scrolling our phones. Your life is shaped more by your likes and dislikes and less by your wisdom. And Krishna calls them our enemies. When he says raga, dvesha, vyavasthito, he means we should organize our raga and dvesha. He's not saying we should not have likes and dislikes, but he's saying we should organize our likes and dislikes. And he says these raga and dvesha, likes, dislikes, are our enemies. Why? Because they distort judgment, they override clarity, and they keep you reactive. So, the solution that he gives is not suppression. He gives the solution, which is the combination of awareness and non enslavement. Let them exist. Let them exist the way they are in our mind, but let them not control us. The observer seeks the likes and dislikes when they arise, but he doesn't act immediately. Freedom begins when you stop reacting to every like and dislike. So now, if we connect both these shlokas, that our actions are driven by our inner tendencies and our tendencies are shaped by our likes and dislikes, we get a relief. And that relief is, so our choice are not as free as we think. And first comes likes and dislikes, then comes action, and then ego stands up and says, I did this. So, in your last difficult decision, can you answer it? Can you just retrospect and say, was it truly your wisdom or your comfort and fear deciding it for you? Freedom is not doing what you like, freedom is not being controlled by what you like. So, we can do a very small exercise also, catching the raga and dvesha in real time. Right now, we are going to observe something very subtle, not outside but inside. The forces that silently drive our choices, raga and dvesha, attraction and aversion. Think of a real situation where you strongly wanted something. I mean, two options I'm giving. One, where you strongly wanted something. Second, when you strongly resisted something. For example, craving something, food, phone, or validation. Avoiding something. I mean, you have to do your own homework. You have to think on your own. I mean, I'm just giving examples here. Avoiding something can be conversation, task, or responsibility. Now, identify the pull. The pull factor is raga, which pulls you towards itself. Now, observe carefully. Was there a strong pull towards something like your favorite food, your your phone, your favorite dress, or just a validation? Number two, when you see that there is a pull, you understand. And now the second thing is identify the push, the dvesha, which is not letting you do something. Was there something you were avoiding because of the dvesha or because of the wisdom? That thin line you need to identify here. I don't want this because this is uncomfortable. I don't want this position because there are people. I mean, we go for audits, we find people who are working in banks for over 15 years and they haven't chosen promotion. They could have become manager or even uh, they could have reached scale 4 even, but they are struggling at scale 2. And when I ask this question to them, why are they struggling being at scale 2 and not at scale 4, they reply that if we get promotion, our responsibility is going to increase. We don't want to leave our comfort zone. So here comes the answer to this question, dvesha. You, with position comes responsibility. And when we observe this mechanism, now bring the key realization to yourself, notice something very important. Your action was not at all neutral. It was either pulled by raga or pushed by dvesha. And you didn't choose it freely, you reacted internally, and then after the when everything is over, the ego stands up and it says, I did everything. And then you live with guilt that you did this, so you should change your behavior. Where you were free, you were not responsible for anything, but you took all blame to yourself. So create a distance, be in a witness mode, be in Sakshi Bhav. And when you can see the desire without immediately acting on it, can you see the discomfort without running away from it? This gap between feeling and action is where the freedom begins. Over to Dr. Sandhya.
Now, what Meenakshi has said, we are going to see, we are going to actually go through an activity where we will try to understand what Meenakshi has just said.
Oh, Ritu, have you also received the boss message for the meeting at 3 p.m.?
Oh no, what a waste of the entire afternoon. The same old bragging of their achievements and new workload for us.
Yeah, I don't understand. Why don't they just send a newly added responsibilities on WhatsApp? I don't understand the need of sitting there for 1 to 2 hours just to be told our new additional responsibility. It's such an unnecessary event.
Absolutely. And what is the outcome of these long meetings? We just sit and listen to them and get more work achievements. Remember, last time it was just 5% increase in the rating, just 5%, and we sat for good 2 hours, and our 4 o'clock tea break was eaten up too.
But but we ate samosa with tea in the last meeting.
That samosa lost all its flavors. Without my tea gossip and a watch on everyone, that samosa was tasteless. We had to sit there listening to old sermons with quotations from our own biodatas that we had already written because we knew them. And we don't need to be hearing the same quotations from our biodata time and again. Did you get anything from those meetings?
Hey Ritu, I think we need to give this meeting another look. I could finish the project well in time because boss read my biodata and showed faith in me, which motivated me to take up the project and finish it so accurately that I myself can't believe my potential these days. These meetings are energizing us. Remember the sales team had cracked the deal which was hanging since last 3 years and no one in the industry could claim it. The boss in the meeting had brainstormed the right steps. You and I were given also the job of analyzing the company's last 10 years working strategy. These meetings are useful if we see beyond just our assignment.
Ah, yes, the bosses had, in fact, divided that huge deal into piecemeals and put all of us on our share of work. And now we are the leading authority in the field. The bosses are quite strategic.
Yes, we really need to break free from the idea of long and useless meetings and understand that these are needed.
I think I really need to override my sanskar of uh, taking these meetings to be useless.
Yes, the raga of attraction to the gossip and samosas and Devesh, which is aversion to the office meeting, needs to be changed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ritu. Thank you, Sanjog. Now, coming to the vasanas of the boardroom. What is vasana? as you see over here, Vasana is a saint of the past experience influencing present perception. Now, let me start here with an example. Let's imagine placing a incense stick in a jar for an hour and then removing it. Even after you remove the stick, the jar still smells like, let's say, the incense stick had a jasmine fragrance. So the jar would still smell like jasmine. Now, how does this apply to real life? It's like an experience. What has just happened or what has just ended. Imagine a successful project or a failed project. While the project has ended, the experience, the scent of that experience is still lingering in the mind. It is still influencing our future preferences, our future fears without us realizing it. So the incense is like that invisible script which is conditioning our mind to make certain choices. While the vasanas are coming from the subconscious imprints of the past, sanskaras are habits. In simple terms, they're habits that our brain gets used to. Now, if we look at vritti, vritti is an event happening, and that instant event leads to a wave of thoughts. Now, let's say an event which is similar to a past event that happens, and this past event has left a vasana or has left the scent of that experience in your mind. Now, when a similar event happens, the sudden thought wave which takes us to the past is what is vritti. And because of this vritti, you suddenly get reminded of that past event, okay? And now your mind is the automatic reaction is the event is a result of the leftover leftover imprint of the leftover vasanas, no? So you tend to react, and this vasana along with the sanskaras, that is when you regularly respond in the same way as a result of your past experience, what happens is it becomes a habit. So then there is a very thin line between that vasana and which slowly becomes a sanskara or the habit. Now let's look at the example that is, you see the picture over here. You see a truck that is stuck in the wet mud. What is happening is the truck driver may try to drive the truck with more force, may try to turn the steering wheel with more force, just because the driver is used to, whenever the truck is stuck, the driver is used to more force to push the truck further. Now, what would happen over here is, while he would apply more force, but because the tire is stuck in that wet mud, it would not be easy for the driver to get the truck out, get the tire out. So if he continues to live or if he continues to respond as per the past conditioning, it would not be easy for the driver to get the truck out. Rather, a better way would be to get a wooden plank or some stones under the tire so that it will create a traction for the tire to get out of the mud. Now, this is what would happen if the driver takes a few moments to think. That is, uses his intellect, uses his experience, and he realizes that the wheel is stuck in the wet mud. So if he continues the way he was doing in the past, the wheel was not stuck in the wet mud. So he could take the wheel out, or he could move as a result of the steering. He could move the wheels as a result of the steering. But here the wheel is stuck. So he needs to use his intellect to see how first he needs to remove the wheel. Only then moving the steering would take the truck further. So taking something like rocks or a wooden plank under the wheel would help in removing the wheel, and then by moving the steering wheel, he can move the truck. That is what is using the viveka or the intelligence. This would happen when the mind understands that mud, if I go to further elaborate, that mud is like the past history. The steering wheel is the present. Now, if you try to move in your present by being stuck in your past, obviously it would not be easy, or it would be impossible to break free. So acknowledging the current, that is acknowledging in the situation that you are, being more aware of yourself, being mindful of yourself, of the conditions in which you are, or your strengths and weaknesses. Okay, that you can do by first taking a pause and then trying to create a traction. By trying to create a traction, that is using your intellect, you can then try to understand how to free yourself from the attachment of your past. Only then you can move forward. So this is what strategic architect would do. Strategic architect would not simply work on spinning the wheel by simply moving the steering wheel. What would happen is the wheel would move in its place at the most, but it is still stuck in the mud, so it cannot take the truck further. The same thing we saw in the activity that Ritu and Sanjog were presenting. Even whatever Meenakshi said was the same thing. Ritu and Sanjog, if you see in the initial part, the immediate irritation upon receiving that meeting invite, it was their mind had a pro-programmed response, or an aversion or a dvesha, that the meeting was a waste. The same old bragging, the same old replay of the script, because it was written in their past that meetings are all about repeating the same commands, or it's they would rather spend more time on working. But when it started with when Sanjog a moment to realize that, oh, you know what, when they started thinking, first it was that Ritu's focus was, oh, that tea break or that samosas, it rather was a waste of time. So but then Sanjog takes a break, and then he really starts thinking, and he says, oh, you know what, I think those meetings really helped us, because those meetings were like, it showed that the boss trusted my skills, and then he helped me become more confident, and because of which I was able to work on my project independently, and I was able to prove myself more. So this is what is using the strategic intellect. We'll come to this a little shortly, but before that, let's look at the case study. The case study that really comes to my mind right now is the Jio disruptor. Now, what happened? When, till the time Jio was launched, the telecom industry, for the past almost 2 decades, it had the mindset that voice is the main product. The data was just an add-on. And then came Ambani. What did Mukesh Ambani's Jio do? Mukesh Ambani's Jio, he realized that digital market was the future. He moved from the red ocean to the blue ocean. Now, what is red ocean? Red ocean is where there is a lot of competition. So it's like a bloodbath where you're fighting with the competition and you're fighting for existence. Whereas blue ocean is where you go into the new ocean. It's a new reality. So what did Jio do? Till Jio came into the market, data was rather a luxury. Data was sold as small packets, as tiny packs, as 1 GB for so many rupees, 2 GB for so many rupees. The voice was rather the breadwinner for most of the telecom companies. Okay, and they were fighting on the pricing in the voice market. And then suddenly, Jio came. Till Jio came, the CEOs were making decisions like how to optimize the profit, how to get more customers, what pricing should we. What should be the price of our the package that we offer to the customers, and it was more of a pricing fight. And then Ambani came. Ambani's Jio made an architectural choice. He looked at the muddy tracks of the industry, and then what he chose to give the industry a totally new traction, a totally new track. And what he did, he deleted the voice script completely. Jio brought in the new digital future, the voice that it said the voice is just another form of data. What he did, he made voice calls free forever. He didn't just compete in that market. He deleted that product that the competitors were relying on survival. And he brought in the IP network. So while the industry veterans, while the experts in the industry were talking about that Indians would not pay for more data, okay, or for the 4G network, what did Jio do? Jio did not listen to the many new thoughts of people. It's like, let us look this way. What happens is, because a mind that is not conditioned, a mind that is stuck in the past, that mind, because the past, there are several experiences. So the mind tends to, the several experiences of the past trigger so many thoughts. Each of those thoughts are like the branches. And each of that branch comes with its own viewpoint. And because of that, the mind becomes muddled with so many viewpoints. What did you, and then when you keep on listening to so many voices in the mind, our mind gets so confused that it becomes easier to listen to just our past experience, to what our mind was conditioned to, and just respond to the past instead of trying to get on the new track. Jio chose to not listen to the many branched views, simply went to provide the cheapest data in the world to the largest population. That is, Jio chose traction. Jio decided to come up with giving data for free for the first 6 months. Now, why did they do that? They did that to create a new habit with the Indian consumer. Till that time, Indians were used to making voice calls and using data in a way that they were limiting the use of internet only when it is absolutely required. But here, when they had data for free, what they started doing is they started accessing videos, they started using data for making calls. So they got used to using data. People forgot to make voice calls. They started, because when I make an internet call, I can make a video call, I can talk to people. So it was much more easier. And once they got used to it, then it was easier for Jio to maximize its hold over the customers. And that is what we see in the, now see, this is where we already spoke about the blue oceans and the red oceans. That is, in blue ocean, you go on a totally new track. Yes, it is new. There are no competitors. So there is no past experience that you can depend on. You do not have a sales history. So you do not know how to create new targets. Yes, that's true. But on a new track, you can get the first mover advantage. While it is difficult, but the first mover advantage can, if you use that in the right manner, then what happens is you can become a much more tougher competition to the competition that follows you. This can happen only when you start questioning the fundamental. You start questioning the basic understanding of people. You start taking calculative risk. You start applying your intelligence. I'm not saying just take a risk. Yes, research is required. Yes, studying the market and having an understanding of the customer pulse is absolutely required. But having done that, taking a calculative risk. No decision can be 100% correct. That is true. But you cannot always take a safe decision, because when you take a safe decision, the results are always, you cannot get the best results. When you take a path that has risk written on it, yes, when you may not succeed. That is true. But you don't have to share that success with somebody else. And the advantage, the first mover advantage, might just make you the king in that industry, the king or the queen in that industry. This is exactly what the shloka 2.41 of Bhagavad Gita says. Now, what is that shloka? Vyavasayatmika buddhirekehe kurunandana bahushakha hyananthasya buddhayo vyavasayinam. That is, a conditioned mind is many branched and indecisive. A strategic architect cultivates a single point intellect that cuts through the noise of the past biases. I just said some time ago that when we depend, or when we are rooted to our past, what happens is the mud that we saw in the slide before was representing the past conditioning. Okay. Now, that past conditioning, when you apply the clarity of the architecture, okay, then you can work on you can kind of condition your mind. Let's look at the picture in more detail. In the picture, you see horses, you see the reins attached to the horses, you see the charioteer, and you see the passenger. Now, what are the horses? The horses over here are the powerhouses. They are the ones that are pulling the chariot. Okay. The horses are also reflecting, the senses. Now, in a leader, generally, the reflex actions are resulting in the urge to snap, the urge to hide, or the urge to blame somebody, or the desire to make immediate profit. So this is what the horses are. The instant reflexes, okay, how our senses react. And then look at the reins that are connected to the horses. These reins should be ideally in the hands of the charioteer. Okay. But if these reins, the charioteer lets go of the reins, or the charioteer is not able to hold the reins, what will happen is the horses will go wherever they smell grass. They will forget about taking the chariot in the direction that the charioteer wants, because senses, they need instant gratification. We post on Instagram, we post a message on WhatsApp, we look for, oh, who's read my message? We look for that single tick becoming double tick. We look for that double tick becoming blue, as Meenakshi said. So the senses look for instant gratification. Now, if the charioteer forgets or is not able to catch the reins, what happens is the charioteer is the mental driver, which is essentially holding the reins to decide the direction. Okay. And the passenger is you. The charioteer is your mind. Understand? So here, you're separating the mind from you as a person. Because very often, though I want to move, but if my mind is not able to take the decision to move, I will not be able to move. If you look at a simple example, let's say a person who has met with an accident and loses a limb. The person, yes, in the market, you get an artificial limb. The artificial limb, let's say the person loses an arm, you get an artificial limb. The limb is attached to the person's shoulder. Now, in regular course, the person is able to move the limb because there are nerves which help in moving the limb. It's the nerves that tell the person to move the limb. But now here, the arm of that person is cut. There is a false arm that is put, but there are no nerves. So how can the person move the limb? Here, it is the mind that is conditioned. It is the mind which tells the person to move the limb. So it is the mind is different from the person. The person wants to use the arm, but if the mind is not tuned to help the person to move the arm, the person will not be able to move the arm. That's why in this diagram, the charioteer is a mind which drives the reins, which holds the reins and directs the horses. And essentially, the passenger is you as a person. So what does that Shloka 2.41 mean? That our mind has many branches. It is conditioned due to a lot of past experience. So it's like as a conditioned leader who has a mind which has so many branches, because there are so many thoughts that keep on going. There are so many experiences. When the problem hits, we tend to look at different possibilities, different what ifs. Okay, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? So we keep on thinking. Now, if what happens is when we keep on thinking as to the what ifs, eventually our mind faces a decision fatigue. Now, a leader does not want to show this fear. So what happens is the leader eventually, in an attempt to hide the fear or in an attempt to get over the decision fatigue, tends to follow an old habit, okay, to react in the same manner as he or she would react in the past without responding to the training that he or she may have gone recently, or without responding to the intellect. The intellect does tell that you should do this way. But because the mind is moving in so many different directions, the mind refuses to listen to the intellect. Now, what a strategic architect would do? A strategic architect, we saw in one of our, in the last week, we spoke about, no, in the second week, we spoke about North Star experience. The North Star is what is the main goal or main motive of my life. All other goals are linked to that North Star. So, Vyavasayatmika Buddhi is that intellect which has understood that one single point or one single goal around which all my life goals are linked to. So, with that intellect, I as a leader will be able to understand, I as a leader will be able to discriminate between the priorities that I need. So, though, if we look at the person responding from past history, if you look at a person responding as a result of the past experiences, so the past fears, the old success, the old scripts will put their, will lead to that person putting a lot of energy in instant reactions, urgent action. And this person will always, this person's goal will always be about survival, will always be about protecting one's ego. Whereas a strategic architect would take a moment to objectively look at the data currently that he or she is facing, would calmly and proactively try to analyze it. That is, will not wait for something to happen. Will understand, like for example, let's say a client is screaming. The instant reaction as per the past is that, let's say the client is screaming and I am listening to the client, my instant reaction could be that I would also start screaming because if the, to stop the client. But then if I take a moment and if I try to remember the past, I may realize that my screaming does not help the situation, because the client may end up screaming more. Eventually, it would only lead to spoiling the scenario. But as against that, if I respond to the client calmly that yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, we can take this action this way. So what will happen is just the use of the tone can calm down the client, and eventually this can lead to adding value. So this can bring a long-term value. This can bring a legacy. So clarity is not just a state of mind. Clarity gives a competitive advantage. Most leaders, they fail not because they do not have resources, but because the charioteer, that is their mind, has become exhausted at looking at the different possibilities and has literally fallen asleep. And because of which the horses, because the mind has fallen asleep, the charioteer has lost control of the horses. So then the horses, they take charge and they respond as a result of the past conditioning, and then they start running helter-skelter. So eventually, the person, that is you, tend to react as per the past. Instead of that, it is important that if you have to break free to come up with a fresh reaction, it is not about killing the energy. It is not about killing the horses. It's rather about giving more strength to your mind so that your mind gets focused. Your mind knows the one most important target, knows the North Star, and then it holds the reins tightly and directs the horses in the right direction. Coming to the Sanchita Reset, that is a tool that we recommend. Now, what is Sanchita Reset? Sanchita Reset, let's look at a high stress moment. You know, when you are highly stressed, it's important to take a moment, withdraw your senses, and introspect. Introspect to find what are the real triggers. That is you, rather than simply being involved in the acting, which we saw in the second video. Instead of just being involved in the acting, coming out and looking at the act that is happening as a spectator, that is witnessing the act. This way, what will happen is you will be able to identify, or you will be able to analyze that what reaction would lead to, what action would lead to what reaction. And you can deliberately choose an action which can be more effective. Now, this deliberate choice of action is an attempt to rewire the brain in real time. For example, another example is, let's say the stock market is falling. When the stock market is falling, the natural reaction is a lot of people tend to sell the stock to cut their losses. But a person who takes, stop being an actor and comes outside and becomes a spectator and starts observing the market, realizes that yes, the stocks of the stock value of the stocks is falling. So if I sell, I'll be able to cut my losses. But instead of selling, because of the lower prices, if I buy more stock, I will be able to buy the stock at much lesser price. So when the market goes back up, I will make bigger profit, and I will also be owning more stock. This is what. So by pausing and then doing an audit of the situation, that person can choose a deliberate action, that is, do a pivot, that is, come out of the normal conditioning, break out of the groove in real time. So this habit, what we are trying to say over here is that your habit to micromanage, that is your habit to being too involved in the action, will lead to more stress. Rather, when you become a spectator, you can delegate more and you can break the pattern and you can show better results. So clearly, leadership isn't a title. It's the ability to override your own programming. It is the ability to change that one small meaningless habit for tomorrow. Find your one small meaningless habit. It could be anything.
To admit one of my dveshas, I would say that I have the habit of completing the sentence when the other person is speaking, or you can say I assume what the other person has to say and I start replying. And the situation becomes very awkward when the person is trying to speak in a flow and he hasn't even completed, and the other person has presumed it, understood it, and start replying also. So that becomes very funny at times, and I need to improve that dvesha of mine, because that creates problem and that also puts me in discomfort situation.
As Meenakshi said, it is very often when somebody is talking to us, our mind is conditioned, and because of it, we start anticipating, oh, this person may be talking about this, even without completely listening. We start assuming, and then our reaction is based on that assumption. and we might miss out the point that the speaker is going to say. We assume that the speaker is going to say this. The speaker might be wanting to say something else. So such small actions, okay, such small habits, if we try to identify and if I try to work on it and try to use that intellect to kind of rewire our thoughts, recondition our thoughts. So what would happen is we would be able to break open the prison of old conditioning, and we can open the doors so that we are able to come out of the biased mindset, and we are able to give ourselves more power, and we are able to we will be able to see more choices so that we can react in the best possible way.
I think Meenakshi spoke about this idea of the ego taking the credit for whatever decisions we make. The ego decides that all the actions have been done by me. I have made the decision, or I decided to do this. And in that context, I would like to share an incident which, after this conversation, helped clarify various things for me. I had been diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver, and the doctor said it is end stage, so you have to have a liver transplant, otherwise you shall die. Now, I was at a stage where I had had enough and more of doctors. I had finished all my family responsibilities, so to speak. I had retired. I didn't really want to prove or do anything, so I said to my family that I'm decided. I have decided that I will not go for liver transplant. It's okay to die. I mean, I've done what I wanted to. My bucket list is almost done. So there's nothing more I want to do. And therefore, it's okay for me to die. There was, of course, a lot of argument, but I said, it's me, it's my body, it's my decision, and I have decided. And my understanding was that after a short time, I will be very ill and I will be admitted to hospital a couple of days, and then, yes, merciful death. There were three reasons for me. I mean, it was to me very clear why I'm doing it. There was the financial issue. It would be very expensive. Two, the risk would be that there's also a lot of physical pain, chances of the operation not going as we hope. The other point was, what is the point? In the sense, why should one continue living when one has already done what they thought they should be doing? So that was my ego, my self saying, I have decided. And then I was given some more information by another doctor friend of mine, not connected with the liver transplant, who explained to me that my concept of death may be very different from what could actually happen. And that shook me in the sense, death does not, I was comfortable with death, but I was comfortable with my definition of death. But definition of death can be very different. And that's when I realized that. And then, of course, I did go through the liver transplant. I did go through a lot of pain and suffering. I did spend a lot of money, but here I am.
So it's what I would like to say over here is, if you want to really become your own strategic architect, if you want to redesign yourself personally and professionally, find that, let's start with finding that one small habit. Maybe it's your route to the work, maybe your first meeting ritual. Find that one small habit, okay, and try to change it. Redesign the blueprint and try to change it. That's all that I had to say for today. Thank you so much for joining the session. Have a great day.